The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Barrett. And this will be the last question for Mr. Geithner.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Secretary Geithner, last year, Secretary Paulson came to the United States Congress and sold the TARP, the Troubled Assets Program, and they were going to buy up toxic assets. Was the Treasury's assistance to AIG consistent on how he sold the TARP originally?
Congressman, I don't think I can answer that question. I was not Secretary of the Treasury then, was not present in that context.
I understand, but you understand how he came, the last administration came and sold it to the United States Congress, and I think it's real simple. I mean, do you think it was consistent with how it was sold to the United States Congress?
Well, I do know that the legislation you passed did provide this very important authority for the government to put capital into the financial system, and I think he did use that authority appropriately and very quickly to help save the system.
I understand that. Chairman, what would you say?
Yes, I think it was appropriate. The legislation allowed for purchase of financial securities.
You said appropriate, but was it consistent? Was it consistent with the way it was sold to the United States Congress?
The emphasis that the Secretary put was on purchases of assets, and it's true that he did not follow through on that, but it was still part of the discussion and part of the legislation to use the money to support failing institutions or to provide capital to healthy institutions.
Secretary Geithner, I applaud you on your statement yesterday about going to buy up the toxic assets. I think that's something we should have done months ago. But because of Congress's action last week with the AIG bonuses, who in their right mind in the private sector would want to enter a contract with the United States government and say, hey, yeah, we're going to help you, and not expect some type of the full weight of the federal government going to come down on them if they make the wrong decision?
Well, you're right to express that concern, and we're going to have to make sure that we design these conditions carefully to help mitigate that risk, and we're going to have to come to a better balance with the Congress as, again, we try to figure out how to respond to the reasonably, perfectly understandable public outrage that we're not using public assistance to reward failure, but still get our system working again. And that's going to require people taking risks, being willing to take risks, so the government doesn't have to assume all the losses in solving this financial crisis. Well, and we're going to have to get up to a better place, both the Congress and the executive branch, on this very complicated question.
And I would hope before we do that, we have some very clear guidelines from both sides. I mean, if I'm in the private sector and I'm thinking about buying one of these toxic assets, I think, somebody's got something in my water. There's no way. Mr. Chairman, would you agree with that? I mean, are we going to have some problems in the private sector with that?
I do think we have to provide assurances to participants in, say, the TALF and the PPIF that their involvement will not be retroactively penalized in some way.
Yeah. Secretary Geithner, undated letters of resignation. I know you know what those are. Have we used any of these with AIG? Have we used any of these with any other organizations? When the federal government steps in, have we got a letter that says, hey, you sign it, and I'll date it? Are we doing anything like that to make sure that people are held responsible for their actions?
Good question, and absolutely we will hold people responsible for their actions. And again, just to remember, on that date in September when we acted, right away, we changed management, brought in a new management team, and began a process of changing composition of the board because we wanted to ensure there was accountability for the judgments they made that brought this company to the brink where it was going to threaten the basic framework of the U.S. financial system.
Specifically with letters of undated letters of resignation?
I don't know that we use that tool, but I'm not sure we need that tool, Congressman. But I think you're right to insist we need to make sure there is accountability in these cases.
I guess the last question I've got, guys, which is the $64 million question, or I guess maybe it's a $64 trillion question, is what's the backup plan? I mean, if everything fails, what do we do? Where do we go from here? Mr. Geithner.
Congress, this plan will work. This plan, because of the authority provided by the Congress, not just to the Treasury but the Fed, gives us broad ability to do what you need to get through a financial crisis like this. It just requires will. It's not about ability. And we just need to keep at it. And we'll need to work with Congress to make sure we can do this on a scale that's going to make it work. But the program we laid out, which will help make sure that there's capital available to financial institutions, that these institutions have confidence that they can meet their commitments, have access to funding and liquidity, allow them to play their role in providing credit in these programs to get credit markets working again. You can already see where we're doing this. You can see interest rates come down in ways that benefit small businesses, working families across the country. We just need to keep at it, make sure people understand that we're going to get through it and we're going to do what's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time's up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.